Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Brady Foulk. He is a dog training expert, a global keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. And he has trained hundreds of people live on dog training, life, and psychology. Welcome to the show, Brady.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I want your audience to know if they have a dog, great. We're going to talk about dog stuff and you're going to learn how to make your dog listen a little bit better, how to get them that way. But if you don't have a dog, if you just have some kids or it's just you, we're still going to talk about leadership and there's still going to be some great takeaways. So I'm excited to be here for you and your audience.
Wonderful, wonderful. You are welcome to the show, Brady. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people all across the globe will understand all the good things about dog training that you just talked about. But first, to understand, Brady, how did you yourself get into dog training? Was it just by chance, or there was a conscious effort to learn all about this stuff?
Yeah, I will definitely share my story. It'll take me about 3-5 minutes to go through it. I want your audience to know before we start that there's a couple rules that I follow during a podcast. One of them is understanding the law of energy. And it's that energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be changed. And so while we're going through this interview, I want you to know that low energy people get low results and high energy people get high results. So with that being said, I want everyone to know that the average dog, and that's Chihuahuas, Pomeranians, Border Collies, German Shepherds, and everything in between, the average dog can learn 165 words. I have a pretty good feeling that your dog could learn maybe 10 to 20 words, maybe even 30 words, and you just don't know it yet. So I'm here today to share my story about how I came to learn that knowledge and that information, and then how I took that from experience and started using that to train other people to get their dogs to come when called or crate training. But me personally, I'm the oldest of 6 in a big family, and we grew up with a bunch of animals. These animals, though, they were like wild animals. We had 13 acres of land and they would run all over the place. They would get into the trash sometimes. They wouldn't come when we called them. Sometimes they'd sleep outside if they didn't come when they were called. So growing up, I saw this and I just thought that's kind of what it was like. But I still wanted my dog to love me even more than that. I wanted them to not run away from home. I wanted them to enjoy being at home, right? So when I moved out of the house and I was 22 years old and I had my first 9-to-5 big boy job, and I decided to get a puppy, and I got an Australian Shepherd. I got him and I named him Bumblebee because his butt wiggles so fast and he has so much energy, and I have a lot of energy too. So it's a match made in heaven. So we go on runs and go to the dog park, and I bought him the best food and he'd sleep in my bed with me, and I gave this guy all the love that I possibly had in me. I was like, this guy, I want to like really connect with him. And I remember I stopped hanging out with my friends as much, but one night I was like, okay, I'm gonna go hang out with you. Bumblebee's like 6 months old, so he's getting a little bit better. Still hates his crate, but that's okay. I'll just leave him in my room. And I was out with my friends for like an hour or two. I came back and the first thing that hit me was the smell. And I was like, oh, this is bad. And I open the door and I look, and there's like 4 piles of poop and there's pee. And then the next thing I notice is there's a huge chunk of the carpet missing, and he's all excited, wiggling his tail. It's like, oh, I'm so happy to see you. Look at all the stuff I did, Dad. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And like a book that I just got, my Tim Ferriss Tools of Titans book, was like ripped up. The first 30 pages gone. And I was like, you couldn't have eaten the old books that I already read. You had to pick the new one that I just got. And that was my breaking point of where I was like, okay, what I'm doing isn't working. He knows that he's loved, but it's not teaching him how not to eat the carpet or how to communicate. He has to go to the bathroom, or how to feel safe and secure in his crate or just in his room when I leave. He doesn't have separation anxiety, you know? So from that point, I went out and I found a mentor. I actually was on a Tim Ferriss podcast listening to him. and Susan Garrett was on, and she's a phenomenal dog trainer. She's a 30+ time world agility champion, and she's done it with different dogs, right? Because sometimes there's this thing like, oh, you just get one lucky dog, and she's done it with 7 dogs, I believe. So it's like, okay, there's something in this formula that's repeatable. And I'm always looking for things that can be repeated. And it's not just a one-off technique, but it's a principle that you can use in different aspects of life. And so she spoke about not just training dogs, but training other animals and who she was taught by. And anywho, I paid her thousands of dollars. Things got better. I crate trained my dog. He started coming when called. He was about a year old, and like things were going good. But of course, you run into some more problems. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But ultimately, what ended up happening is I left my job after about 2 years, and I started just helping friends and family with their puppies and dogs. And then COVID happened. So then I started doing Zoom lessons and like started reaching out that way. And I was charging like $25 for a lesson and teaching over Zoom, which is a very interesting thing to do, but I've gotten better at it with directing people like how to go and how to communicate with their dog. And since then I've trained a dog how to get a water bottle out of their fridge for their owner who's in a wheelchair, how to pick up credit cards. I taught a pig how to paint, and she's raised over $10,000 for her nonprofit. So I worked with different animals at Farm Animal Refuge. I've worked with dogs. I've worked with all sorts of different breeds of dogs and ages of dogs. And the one thing I found is all dogs can learn. All dogs enjoy learning. You'll see their tail wagging and you're like, oh, they're actually enjoying solving this problem. And so that leads us here today where I'm sharing this message to let people know what their dog is capable of and some tips and tricks that'll help you go from where I was to where I am now and save you some time in between.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, how does one get started with this communicating with his or her dog? What is the best way to do so? And you said that dogs enjoy learning. What kind of learning do they enjoy, and what is the kind of learning they may not enjoy? Help us this, so that people
Yeah.
can train their dogs the way they want to and get their dream dog, and in the process get a very good friend, someone who would be fun to have around.
Yeah, so this is great because I believe it all starts with the leader that you want to be for your dog, because there's different ways you can get behavior from them. And I believe being a leader means more than just getting results. I believe you're on a journey with your dog. It's a spiritual journey. You're here to learn things with them, to overcome obstacles. And I watched on camera as one of my old roommates, he led in a different way than I lead. And I watched him kick and punch my dog. I caught him on camera, and it lit a fire inside of me, and it made me realize just really how important it is how you teach and how you lead. And I realized there's 3 ways you can lead. You can lead with punishment and intimidation. You can lead with bribes and incentives, and you can lead with growth and inspiration. All 3 of them are going to work. All 3 come with consequences, but only one is going to give you the connection with your dog that you're really craving. And growing up, I mentioned I'm the oldest of 6, and one of my siblings shared a story with me a couple of years back how they weren't doing what I asked them to do, whatever that was. I can't remember. But I was a little controlling back then. And since they didn't do what I asked them to, I took all their crayons and I put them in a pot and I melted them. And I used straight intimidation. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to destroy your stuff, right? And it's not a very nice way to lead, but it did get them to do what I asked. So it it didn't feel very good. Well, actually, it felt good in the moment because I got what I wanted, but it wasn't good for others. It didn't serve the greater good. And yeah, it wasn't good for me. So the next thing is incentives and bribes. And I talked about that with my puppy at first, right? I bought him the best treats. He slept in my bed. He like had full reign of the house to do whatever he wanted. And that built us a lot of love, but it wasn't the connection where I could be like, hey, can you go do this thing? And they were like, oh, I would love to. It was like, no, not right now. And it's like, but don't you remember all the stuff I gave you? And they're like, don't care. Do you have any stuff now? And it's like, and so the problem with incentives is they just keep wanting more and more and more and more. And people are always like, how do I just stop giving my dog treats? And it's not necessarily about stopping giving your dogs treats, because there has to be some type of reinforcement, because humans do things for two reasons, either to avoid pain or to gain pleasure. And we want to make sure that we're rewarding them with pleasurable things. And that could be love, that could be playing with a toy, that could be a treat, right? But that takes us to the third way to lead, which is with inspiration and growth. And I'm sure we all can remember the leaders who use pain and punishment, right? Like you can remember those people in your life, and I'm sure other people can listening. And you can remember the people who bribed you to go do something, and you're like, oh, I feel kind of being manipulated a little bit, but if they're giving me hundreds of dollars, but it's kind of like, I would never do that again. And then we can remember leaders who just inspired you to grow and do the hard things and to push through and persevere and to look at life maybe a little bit differently. And that type of leadership looks like you are picking and choosing the behaviors that you want to reward. Positive is not permissive. You still need rules in order to have success. And growing up, we would play board games, but we would always fight. And it wasn't until my girlfriend joined us, and she's a project manager to lots of details, and we pulled out Monopoly and everyone grabbed for the money. And she's like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, it's just whoever gets whatever they get. And she's like, no, that's not how it works. Everyone gets a set amount of money, right? And then there's a banker and there's rules. And we actually made it through the whole game of Monopoly and only one person cried. Normally, like everyone is fighting and we don't even finish the game. So these type of leadership styles, they can hold you accountable respectfully, and they're able to reward you when you do the right thing. And it's done in a sequence where you follow grandma's rule. And people would come over to my house growing up and they say, knock on the door, and they go, can Brady come play? My mom would look at me and she goes, is your room clean? If my room wasn't clean, I couldn't go play. If my room was clean, I could. So if it wasn't clean, she'd go, well, how are you going to play if your room's not clean? I'd be like, shoot, so I got to do this thing before I get the thing that I want. So that's the most important thing in dog training, is like the type of leader you're going to be, and just realizing that they're all going to work and you have a choice to make. And it's, how do you want to be remembered? And when you get furious, get curious.
Right, Brady. Now, do dogs also communicate, and how can we communicate at the same time? Help us with this, because if I choose my style, in terms of training, then how is the next step? What is the next step then? How do I go ahead with that?
Yes. So communicating with them, you're going to want to be intentional, and you're gonna have to learn some things, right? So body language is a big one for dogs. And so the first thing owners learn is about potty training. And there's a certain type of waddle when your dog has to potty, just like a kid. And they sniff around a little bit different. So you're starting to watch their body language. And then you got the tail wagging, and then when they yawn. Those are all very important ways to communicate. The thing is, though, we want to start teaching them how to start listening to us. So one of the first games I teach a dog is how to search or catch. And the way that I do it is I'll wave my hand first, and they'll look at my hand, and then I'll reach in the bowl, and then I'll toss the treat. Now, this is the first level of communication, and I do this in a very specific order because I want the dog to see me without a treat. You look at me. Since you looked at me, now I'm going to reward you and grab a treat and then give it to you. And if you follow that sequence, the dog learns to look at you a lot. And it's a very good behavior. If your dog wants to focus on something, they turn and look at you, and then you can reward them for that. Now, what sometimes people do is they just grab a treat and they start waving it around, and then they give the dog the treat. But now you're just bribing him. And so you need that treat. So it's wave your hand, grab a treat, and then give it to him. And then from there, you want to start teaching them how to sit and down. And those are two very important things for being out in public with people too. And you can do that with your hand too, by like guiding them with your hand, but we won't get into all the details right now. But communicating with your dog, the important things are the body language to pay attention to, and then the sequence aspect of doing things in the right order. And it's see the thing that I want, and then I'm going to reward you for looking at that thing. Does that make
Right,
sense?
right. Indeed, indeed. Now, in terms of owners who have these dogs, what are the major challenges that they face that they need help from you in? And from your perspective, now you are a big dog trainer, but in a day-to-day life, people may have not so big a problem, but the general one. So, if you can tell, the major challenges or the day-to-day problems that they have, and they just think, I wish I could solve it, solve those problems, and so that the dog is a better trained dog.
Yeah, that one is great. That one is really asking, like, how do I create something that is sustainable, that will last, and like I can have a great relationship with my dog, to have your dream dog. And I remember a story. This is a few years ago. Her name is Fuchsia, the dog that I trained, and she had a prong collar on, and she would bite people and dogs. She didn't really like to play. She didn't really like food. And she was getting into problems at home too with the cats. She was starting to like fight with the cats. And it's kind of a lot of things that are happening, right? So she wouldn't come when called either. She would run away from them. And so it's like, well, where do you even start? And that's sometimes a lot of people's starting points is their dog doesn't come when called. They cause some problems at home, or they don't listen. And for Fuchsia, it was really important to start connecting and understanding her world, and starting to look at it like, what is triggering this dog? Like, why does she have all this energy built up, and why is she reacting in this way? Because no one does nothing. There's a reason for everything, right? So the way behavior works is there's a trigger, and then the behavior, and then a consequence, if it's good or bad. And so the first thing is just to connect and understand their world. Once I did that, I went over to their home, and I noticed their house was a little bit smaller, and it was very tightly packed. There was a lot of boxes, and the couches were really close, so it created a lot of tight spaces to move around. And then the next thing I noticed is they would play this fun game for Fuchsia. Well, it was fun for Fuchsia. It wasn't fun for the owners, where it was like, chase me. And so Fuchsia would run around the yard, and they would kind of chase her around, and they would laugh about it and stuff, right? And I'm like, well, that's not really teaching her how to come to you. That's really just rewarding her how to run away from you. Like, I get that it's fun, but the thing that you're building on the back end is going to sink your ship at the end of the day. And then the cat situation, she doesn't really like food. So how are we going to start training that? Typically the cats and her get in a fight, or she'll growl at the cats like while they're eating. And so we want to start changing that association too. And the biggest part of it is rituals or opportunities for transformation. What that means is we started putting together a routine to where the house was a little bit cleaner more often, and things were spread out and more open in the house. And just by changing that alone, the dog's energy, you could feel it to start to shift. Like, there's just more space around the house. We threw some stuff away. We gave her own dog place area to hang out. And that stopped them like rubbing past each other as they're walking, and it stopped some of the growling and stuff going on. And then the running away from them, we had to stop playing this game, and we had to create a new habit. And that is important to see kind of like the bigger picture of what's happening. And so we switched the game on them, right? So now instead of chasing her, she chases us. So we would run around the backyard, and at first she would just run away from us. And then we would run all the way around. And maybe sometimes she wouldn't chase it, but we would run back inside the house. And then she'd be like, you guys left me. And then she would run to the door and be like, hey, what's up? And then we would go back outside, and then she would run away from us really quick. She's like, I know this game. And then we would go back inside, and then she would run back to the door. And then she doesn't really like food, but dogs have to eat. So there's always some sort of leverage there. And so we got some tuna. So we got some really, really high value treats. And sometimes people want to pay their employees in like $5 bills, $10 bills, and you're going to get $5, $10 results from them. But if you're paying with $100 bills and you're rewarding them and you're helping them grow, they're going to give that back to you. And through just these simple shifts, we were able to create more harmony at home by creating a more holistic approach to it, by just looking at what we're doing and then creating some new rituals around what does feeding time look like. Now they have their own separate areas. What does your games look like? So now she's coming when called better. And if she runs away from you, it's not a bad thing. And we're doing this in a safe gated area too. And it really just goes to prove the point that you have to ask yourself, how can I make this better?
Right, right, Brady. Now, a dog, does it understand gestures better or language? Obviously, it does not. But then, how does the dog understand even the words that you say? Is it through gestures that you train? How does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. That took me a few years to figure out and to really understand. And it's really quite simple. Once I explain it to you, you'll understand it forever. And it really goes back to the ABCs of dog training: antecedent, behavior, consequence. So I train dogs to understand words, how to understand hand signals, how to understand when someone knocks at the door and just sounds, right? And all you have to do is first you have to teach the behavior. So I don't name anything until the behavior is actually solidified. So what I do is if I'm teaching a dog to sit, right, or to down or to roll over, I guide them into that position and I do it over and over again until they go into that position. And I use a little target stick, or I'll use my hand as a target. And so I'll go like this, and then they'll guide them up and then they'll sit, and then I'll go like this for down. But I don't say those words. But as I do that, I'll use a treat and I'll get them down, and I'll use my target stick and I'll reward them. And once they got the behavior down, then I'm going to do a simple formula, ABC. I'm going to say the word sit. I'm going to take a breath, and then I'm going to guide them into the position. And then I'm going to reward them. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to say the word and then take a breath and then guide them into the position and reward them. Now, this is just Pavlovian conditioning. It's really easy. Pavlov showed that when you ring the bell and then you bring out the food, the dog salivates. We're just transferring a behavior to a neutral stimulus. And that is just a word. You could say potato for all I care. You can name it hedgehog. Like, you could name words whatever you want to. It's just, if you follow this formula, you can establish whatever you want. So I'll train snap to mean sit. So I'll snap, and then they already know the word sit now. So then I say sit, which gets the behavior, and then I reward them. And I do it again. I snap, I take a breath, I say sit, and then I reward them. Next thing you know, I snap and the dog's like, oh, I've seen this pattern. I sit, and then I reward them, and I stop saying sit, and I snap, and then I reward. And it's really quite simple.
Right, right, Brady. Now, in terms of dogs, a lot of owners are very good. A lot of owners are not so good people. Can dogs know whether their owners are good people or not so good people? But they are there with their owners. What is your understanding of dogs' understanding of their owners?
Yeah, this is interesting. This is nature versus nurture in a sense. And each dog is going to react differently. And what I found is the owners play a lot into it. So dogs have really good smell. And they did this experiment where they took random owners and their dog, and they took them and put them in a room with a random person. And they put them on opposite sides of the room. And in the middle of the room, they put sweat samples. And one of the sweat samples is from people who watched the movie Frozen, a really happy movie, a Disney movie, great, right? And they took that sweat sample. And then the other movie they took from a scary movie, The Shining. And they took that sweat and they put it in the room at separate times. And so they let the dog go, and it smelled the sweat from the Frozen people. And then it went over to the person and started saying hi and wagging its tail and like, hi, how are you? And then they put the sweat from the scary movie in the room, and the dog smelled that. And then they immediately ran away and started hiding from the person. And then some of the dogs wouldn't even go back inside the room. They were so afraid of it. And it wasn't the person, it was just the smell, right? So yes, there's certain things being admitted when you get afraid. There's certain smells that are happening that we can't tell, but dogs are definitely picking up on because they can smell all sorts of stuff, right? There's all sorts of things that dogs help with, diabetes, and it's amazing to me all the stuff they can smell. And so why I say this is, if a person is always afraid themselves and like they kind of live in that state, the dog's going to smell that and they're going to react to it. They're going to say something is scary about this and I should be like protective right now. And that goes to fight, flight, or freeze, and each dog is going to respond differently. Right? Some dogs freeze, some dogs run away, some dogs bite, and that's like the nurture part or the nature part, right? But you can shift that too if you want. So what I found is owners will go on walks sometimes late at night with their dogs, and they'll see someone and they'll get afraid and they'll start sweating and feeling this chemical reaction. Their cortisol levels will spike and heart rate will start pumping. Their dog smells that and they go, that person means scary things because my owner is scared. And that's how they start associating who is scary, who is not. Now, some of my friends, they're single and they want their dogs to find certain types of women, their ideal women. So when they run into that woman, they give their dog lots of treats and they get really excited. So when the dog sees a certain type of woman, they like prioritize them. So you can influence these things, and these things are also happening subconsciously. So it pays to be mindful of like, how am I being right now? And then also, what am I rewarding and what am I not rewarding?
Right. So this is interesting. How does a single person, a single man, train his dog about the kind of woman that would be great for him? Is it like he sees somebody and he gives some things to the dog, and the dog knows, okay, this is the type of person he should be looking for his owner?
You got it. It goes back to the Pavlovian conditioning. You see this, and then I give you something that you like, either playing with a toy or a treat, and then I just repeat it and we condition it.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of as a individual who is not a dog owner, normal person walking on the street in a park, either a street dog or a trained dog, how do and sometimes, but as an individual you are always scared, afraid also, that you don't know how the dog will react. Many a times it's a very closed area and the dog will come and sniff you out. How do you react or behave at that point in time when you are in that situation? The general rule is just stand there and the dog will sniff and go away. But what happens that is it a foolproof thing? Are there other things that an individual can do to not let any harm come to him or her, and also to not scare the dog? Help us understand. Give us any tips in this particular area.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I study jujitsu and I believe leaders anticipate and followers react. So I'm constantly anticipating things. Even from like a human standpoint, sometimes the way I stand is going to protect myself if someone decides to try to punch me. I'm taking in, I don't think the person is, but if they did, I'm prepared for it. And there's some things with dogs too that you can be intentional about. And obviously, anytime you run into a dog that you don't know, there's so many different things that are happening. But the best thing you can do is to take a breath. Remember they're smelling if you're afraid or not, right? So like take a breath, be like, all right, I'm good. I have resources. I can handle anything that comes to me. And typically I just don't look at the dog. I won't make eye contact with them. I'll look away from them and I'll walk not directly at them, but I'll try to curve if I can, just kind of like bend just a little bit. And these are all just subtle communication things that humans do too, right? If you're walking on the street and you look at someone and they look away from you, you're like, oh, that person doesn't want to talk to me. And so dogs understand that too. So I'm not going to make eye contact with them. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm just going to go around them. If they do come up to me and start sniffing me, I'm not even going to touch them either. If I don't know them, I'm just going to keep walking. I'm probably not even going to really stop. I'm just going to pretend like I ignore them just completely, like they don't even exist in a sense. And typically they get the hint. Now, it's not always that easy. I was on a walk the other day and I had 5 dogs with me and two dogs got out of their fence and they started running at us and like charging at us, right? And they started like barking and like getting close to my dogs, and it's like super crazy thing, right? And there's just chaotic. Um, in that moment, I had to use my voice, and I feel like when you own your voice, you own your power. And I just said 1, 2, 3, stop. And I stood up and I stepped in front of my dogs towards these other dogs, and they're like, whoa, 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 okay. And then like I kept moving, like I didn't stop to fight them. I set a standard, and then I continued to move, and then these dogs ran back to their home. And that was a very uncomfortable moment for me. It was uncomfortable for the dogs. It was a lot of tension. And in that situation, there's really very limited things like you're able to do. And if you start running away from the dogs and they want to chase you, so it's like stepping up. Same if you see a bear, right? The advice is if you see a bear, you got to be like, rawr, but you don't smile, right? You're a little bit more serious. But I ignore them first, right? Like I don't even pay attention. And then if someone confronts me, like in jujitsu, like if someone's like, I want to fight you, bro, I'd be like, stop. Like, we're not going to go here. I'm going to try to leave the situation, but I'm also going to be making sure that like I'm protected. And if something does happen, like I'm trained to react,
Absolutely, absolutely. You have explained things, given tips very, very nicely to us so that we can learn all these things. People can learn all these things, try and learn these things. But there is so much to learn from you. We'll come to that. One last question I've got is for you, Brady, is to understand this saying people say every dog has its day. So I
Okay.
want to understand what is this day look like? What does this day look like for the dog actually this particular day? Have you when dog is having the day of his life?
I love it. Yeah, the day of their life, I feel, I mean, and there's different opinions on this too. Like my day is gonna look different than someone else's, but I think dogs appreciate a lot of connection. They appreciate a lot of variety. They appreciate a lot of significance and love, and also growth. So if I'm looking for like a great day for my dog, I'm going to try to meet all of those needs at a very high level. And what that means is we're going to wake up, we're going to make sure you're going potty on time, so you're not just like having to wait too long. I'm going to make sure I'm aware of this. We're going to go on a walk to make sure we get our steps in and we're staying healthy. We're going to have a fun breakfast training session, and we're going to learn some new things. You're going to go and play. And if typically there's dogs at our house, so they all go out and they play together for 30 minutes or so. But if it was just a single dog, I would probably go take him somewhere and go experience some experiences. Either a new park or a new walk or a new trail, something that gives them that variety of something that's a little bit different. And then we're going to take a nap, because I feel like naps are very important. I'll make sure you get a nap. And then I'm kind of going to do this cycle again. I'm going to make sure you're going to the bathroom, and we're going to do another lesson. We're going to train something. So like right now I'm training my dog how to ride a skateboard, and she's loving it, right? We spent the last, we were talking about an apple a day keeps the doctor away. We spent the last 26 days training her to ride this skateboard. And it's not like I spent 5 hours one day. It's like, no, we're taking steps every day. So every dog gets their day I feel like every dog should get their day every day. And that just comes down to rituals,
Wonderful, wonderful. As I said, there is so much to learn from you, learn
Yeah.
about these things. So, for those who would like to connect with you, get their dog trained by you, and all the training that you give, what is the best way for them to connect with you, Brady?
Yeah, the best thing to do is you'll see underneath my name, it says ND Dog Training. Give me a follow on TikTok and Instagram. And then after, send me a DM that says dog training. And what I'll do is I'll send you some resources to help you get started with your dog, because there is a lot of stuff to cover. I hope everyone learned at least one thing from this lesson, even if it's just like, my dog has a lot of potential, I need to follow a sequence, and I can start sharing those resources with you. And you can also follow along to see Curiosity ride this skateboard, because I'm posting every day sharing that story too. So that's the best way to kind of follow along and see who I am.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.